In this video, you will learn how to solve the problems for homework number 3. The directions say to solve each equation and show all properties of equality used. A property of equality is when you use an inverse operation and you write it fairly on both the left and right side. You'll notice in question number 1 that there is a variable term on the left side and a variable term on the right side. When they are on different sides of the equation, you cannot combine them together. So this is not 8r. Because this side of the equation has only one term, that means that this is the side where all of the variables should be. So the left side of the equation has two types of terms, variable terms and constant terms. So we want this variable term of positive 2r to disappear from the left side and come over here and combine with the r on the right side. This is a fair property of equality here. So I'm going to subtract 2r from the left and I'm going to subtract 2r from the right. You must write both the coefficient and the constant. Now I can finish solving this equation using my inverse of division for invisible multiplication. The coefficient is 4, so I divide both sides by 4. Notice each time I complete a step of work, I have an inverse or cross out happening. In question number 2, the right side of the equation is a constant. Therefore, I need to move all of my constants to the right side. This is a variable term. This is a constant. So let's add 4 this time. 3x is my rewrite. 4 and negative 4 are inverses, and negative 28 plus 4 is negative 24. We'll complete the problem by dividing both sides by the coefficient and get our final answer. Question number 3 should look familiar. We've been solving these for a while. Find your variable, remove the constant first, rewrite the equation, and remove your coefficient last. This says divide by 5. The inverse of divide by 5 is multiply by 5. You'll notice I write it slightly higher up by the numerator to get that cancellation here. Let's take a look at the next 3. In these questions, we're going to have to distribute to clear the parentheses. So let's take a look at number 4. Negative 3 times 3w is negative 9w. Negative 3 times subtract 6 is the same as negative 3 times negative 6. Negative times a negative makes a positive. Rewrite the answer. Use the additive inverse to clear my constants. Rewrite the problem. Divide. And I'm going to reduce this fraction. When I have a positive divided by a negative, I get a negative. And both of these have a common factor of 3. I'm not going to write this as a decimal because when you divide by 3 from 4, you're going to get a repeating decimal. So I'm going to leave it like this, or you could write it as negative 1 and 1/3. Either one would be acceptable. This is preferred. Number 5. 1/4 times 8 means 1 times 8 and 8 divided by 4. 1 times 8 is 8. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 1 times negative 12 is negative 12. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. Now that I've distributed and my parentheses are gone, I can solve this equation using inverse operations. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides and rewrite. I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient and get my final answer. 2 goes into 17 8 times with 1 left over, or you could write it as a decimal. Both are acceptable. This one can be written in decimal form. This one cannot because it repeats. And even though I know you like to write that repeating bar, we're not going to use that. Let's look at questions 6, 7, and 8. We're going to continue using the distributive property here. Half of 8 is 4, and half of 20, or minus 20, is minus 10. Clear the constant. Rewrite. Clear the coefficient. Rewrite. Pay attention on this one, it's a little tricky. This minus sign here does not belong to 5. It belongs to this term here. So if I want to clear the 5, I cannot pay attention to this sign. This 5 has a sign in front of it. If you don't see it, it's an invisible positive. So the inverse here would be subtract, or negative 5. These are opposites. This is part of my rewrite. I bring down the minus, the W, the divide, the 2. 9 minus 5 is 4. Now for this part of the problem, the inverse of dividing would be multiplying. And since I have a negative sign on the side here, I'm going to slide it down and give it to 2. Now when I multiply, I will clear this negative sign away, and W will be all by itself. You can't have any negative signs in front of your variables. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. No parentheses, so I clear the constant, and I rewrite. Now for here, the inverse of multiplying would be dividing. But when you divide by a fraction, you're really multiplying by the reciprocal. So you can write this, what I just wrote in red, or you can show that dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal. So I take my negative 3/4 and I flip it over. These are inverses. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. Negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. Let's take a look at the next 3. In this problem, I cannot add 2 until I clear this denominator. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 8. Now the a minus 2 is no longer part of a fraction. And now I can clear that constant. For number 10, remember in the last problem, the minus sign belongs to the 4/9, not the 6. So when I clear the 6, I have to do the opposite, which is negative 6, because this 6 has an invisible positive sign in front of it. Cross off the inverses, rewrite the sign and the value. Now remember, this is a multiplication problem, and the inverse would be dividing. But we don't divide by fractions. We multiply by the reciprocals. Now it doesn't matter where I put the negative sign, numerator, denominator, or on the side. It doesn't matter. These are inverses. And over here we're going to get negative 16 times negative 9, divide by 4. So I'm actually going to reduce this first. This is 1, this is 4, so I'm going to get positive 36. Last one. Subtract 4 from both sides. Rewrite. Now remember, it's all about inverses. So the opposite of divide is multiply. So h is equal to 6. H is equal to 6. Sorry, the pen's not working. Alright, let's do our last section here, the Wednesday box. Again, if you have variables on both sides, you've got to get the variables together. But be careful which variable you move. If you move this 8x, which is fair, it's not helpful. You see how everybody's all on the same side now? And this whole side is empty. So we don't want to do that. We're going to move the 6x, and we write both the 6 and the x. And now we can finish our problem. Remember, you want to get your variables together. In this problem, since there are 2 terms on the left and 2 terms on the right, it doesn't matter which variable you move. I like to keep my variable positive, so I'm going to choose to move the 7x. Rewrite. Clear the constant. Rewrite. Clear the coefficient. Okay, remember, when there are 2 variable terms, they need to be together. But you can't take away a variable term if it's the only thing on that side. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Rewrite. Divide. And finish. You could also write a mixed number. Okay, last 3. Clear the constant. Rewrite. When you need to divide by a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal. Inverses cancel out, and negative 35. This problem has variables on both sides. So I'm going to choose to move the 3 because that keeps my variable positive. Get rid of my constant. Get rid of my coefficient. Okay, last one. Move my constant. And don't forget, the inverse of division is multiplication. The remainder of the worksheet is review that you don't need any assistance with.